Christianity is quite different in how it approaches the question of suffering when laid alongside other alternatives. So broadly within Eastern thought, the fundamental idea is the idea of karma, this law of cause and effect. And so any experience that a human being might have of suffering is down to what they themselves have done, or perhaps what they've done in a previous life. There are cycles of incarnations. But ultimately, you get what you deserve. And so people who suffer must have done something to deserve it. It's a pretty kind of brutal way of seeing the world, but it's a popular idea. We might look at another great monotheistic religion like Islam, and that positions God as not just all-powerful, but actually as determining every detail of how things unfold in the experience of every human person. So everything that happens is God's will. That's why that word, inshallah, God willing, is so important. And so if a person goes through an experience of suffering within that framework, within that way of looking at the world, you would conclude God has caused it, this is God's will, and so a person just endures it. And then you might look at a materialist or naturalist way of looking at the world, which is that there is no God, all that exists are the physical matter of the universe, so we are essentially just our bodies, we're just physics, chemistry and atoms. And so suffering is a physical experience. It's what happens to a body, and there's no deeper meaning to it. We might care about the suffering of people in our own survival group or people who are blood relatives, but there's really no meaning to our own suffering or the suffering of others. And then within Christian faith, quite uniquely, you have this idea of love as the fundamental underpinning reality of life. That because love exists, life exists. God is loving and he brings human life into this world. That for love to be possible, there must be the capacity to freely choose. Love cannot be compelled. And suffering enters a loving world because people make decisions that harm themselves and others, and that ultimately harm the environment, harm the very fabric of the universe. And so as a result of human decisions, there's this alienation between us and one another, and between us and this universe that we live in. And so physical suffering is explained. But Christian faith doesn't just leave us with explanation as to why and how this might be possible, because utterly uniquely, the God who is so loving and who made this world enters the suffering world, and he takes suffering into his own experience as God. He lives in Jesus in human history, and that's evidence. This isn't just an idea, this actually happened. And God in Jesus suffers with us and for us as human beings, and he ultimately redeems our experience of suffering and is then able, through the resurrection of Jesus doesn't remain dead after his crucifixion. He's then able to actually journey with us, to carry us through, to bring his love and presence into our human experience of suffering. So there's explanation of how and why, and then there's presence with us, and then there's also this future hope that this world is not all that will be, that ultimately God will put all things right. Wipe tears away from our eyes is how the book of Revelation puts it. So as we experience suffering, there's the future hope of things being right and things being well, ultimately in eternity.